Limitless episodes 21 and 22 finale. I didn't want it to end, especially after the strength of episode 20, but here we are, the finale of Limitless, the series. It originally aired in two parts, but the review is going to be the whole thing all together. We start 1 month after Sands was arrested, and Brian is trying to figure out who else is in Sands' Legion because Piper still hasn't been found or freed. While Brian is laying out all the information he has to his team, he calls Piper his kind of girlfriend, which is kind of cool. Finch is no longer calling the villain group the Legion of Doom. They are now being referred to as the Legion of Whom, since Brian is trying to figure out who is in the Legion. Unfortunately, Finch is no longer working with the FBI, so Brian is brainstorming with his sister, his brother, and one of his brother's kids. Mostly, they are just sitting around because they have nearly nothing to contribute. But Brian is back to living at home with his mom and dad, and the show's leaning in very much into the Chuck vibes that me and Brandon had gotten throughout. When Brian's dad yells out for Brian to get to his job at the the Data Vision. That's just a little joke because Brian, off of NZT, is working at a place where, very similar to where Chuck worked with his intersect in his mind. Even on the way out, this show is so good at introducing fun and unexpected bits while trying to sell a television at the Datavision. Brian has a hit of residual NZT that was left in his system, and he's able to convince a dude to buy a curved television just because of being able to bolster the guy's ego, and that's how he convinced him to get it. I enjoy that the show came up with this idea because when it comes to great ideas, well, just to brag a little bit, I feel like I had a great idea when I conceived of Everlasting Survivors, my superhero trio. Their first collected book, Everlasting Survivors, Volume 1, all day long, is available now. If you follow the link in the description of this video, you can pick yourself up one of 5 separate covers. You can get a t-shirt with the Everlasting Survivors logo on it. You can get a hat with the Gamble Comics logo. Anybody who makes a purchase, whether it's one of the 5 covers or a t-shirt, a hat, or one of the 2 posters, anyone who makes a purchase will get a Gamble Comics sticker as a thank you for making the purchase. Back to the show. Another compliment I have for the finale is that Rebecca Harris hasn't given up on Brian Finch, and she meets up with him for coffee. The bad news of the meetup is that the FBI have just as much news on Piper as Brian does, which is basically nothing. This development reminds me of something I forgot to note about the pre-work brainstorming session the Finch family had. Brian's sister asked a question: what if Piper's lost her fight with the nasty cabal? And I just thought that was a very intriguing question to ask. I mean, it hasn't been a month since she's been captured, so it's a good thing somebody laid it out there that it could be too little too late. But Finch is adamant that he needs NZT from the FBI to help find Piper. Harris reminds him that they can't give it to him because the NZT side effects could harm him, and the FBI won't allow that. It seems Brian may not need the FBI to hook him up with NZT, as there's a news story, and it is believed that there's a new street drug popping up that gives people delusions of being able to do things that they normally couldn't. And, obviously Brian and Harris think that it is NZT once again hitting the streets. Back at the FBI, we meet a DEA agent, Adam Brewster. Supposedly, he is here to stop the spread of the NZT outbreak. I am not as trusting of him as Naz is. She recommends Harris tell him everything, and so Rebecca lets Brewster know that the FBI have good reason to think Senator Mara, who is currently running for president, should be questioned about this because of his ties to Jared Sands, who is in custody. Brewster calls the Legion of Whom a big brain cult. The show is just so fun and good at coming up with witty names. The FBI are interviewing all of the folks trying to figure out this new NZT and how it got released on the street. One name keeps coming up, or word, if you will, Apocryphon. I feel like Brewster is trying too hard to be cool, like an insider version of Finch. But I'm just not a fan of him. He feels very disingenuous to me. We go back to classic, original Finch, not that wannabe new Finch. He's at the data vision working, and we meet his coworker Grover, who keeps talking about how he is in the know and has all of the connections. He's entertaining because Grover really doesn't feel like a drug-connected dude to me. Papa Finch sees on the news that NZT is out in the wild and is grateful that Brian is not in the hospital due to the side effects like so many are experiencing. And the thing is that, man, Papa Finch, he's been very concerned throughout for Brian, so this sticks with his character. Brian's dad tries to comfort him because he knows Brian is still worried about Piper, and he, Finch, who used to work at a law firm, Papa Finch that is, has contacted an investigator friend of his and told Brian that, the best guy's on the case and they'll figure it out. But, Brian clearly is still worried, and rightfully so. Rebecca Harris has come to Brian's house for a secret late-night meetup. Brian is pumped. He thinks the FBI want him to be tagged back in, but nope. Harris just wants to know what Brian remembers about the name or code word or whatever it is Apocryphon is. Unfortunately, Brian can't remember, and it hurts him feeling as though he's useless. He feels like Rebecca only came to remind him that on NZT he is helpful, but without it he isn't helpful. And I get it, Brian. It sucks feeling as though you can't contribute, and it's easy to see his perspective. What comes next I didn't see from a mile away, but I really should have, because at Data Vision, Brian is testing out to see if Grover actually does have the hookup with NZT. Is this really the right move, Brian? Well, Grover gets Brian to a party with NZT. No way this is going to go bad, right? Yeah, exactly. The drug dealer at the party tries to warn Brian and Grover before taking NZT. Brian corrects her and then thinks better of it. He's like, it's not even worth my time to tell her the facts of NZT. He pays the drug dealer, walks away with Grover, and he just takes it because, Brian's not scared. He's just an old pro at this. And NZT Brian comes back with a vengeance. He tells regular Brian, we should take Grover on this adventure with us, because Brian has the idea, NZT Brian, the one that regular Brian imagines when he is on NZT, has the idea to use the information that the drug dealer they bought the NZT from to track down where the NZT came from. And at the end of the journey, Brian and Grover have a large stockpile of NZT, but not a lot of information. We checked back with Rebecca, who is not at the FBI, but with Jared Sands in a prison visitation area. Sands requested this meeting because Mora has people at his disposal, even here in prison. Sands gives Harris a tip about the street NZT as a show of good faith to try and get protection. But Harris has not agreed until she looks into the information. The first question I ask myself when Sands asks for protection from Mara in prison is, would Mara kill Sands in prison? And then I think of real life and I'm like, yeah, I'm convinced. Not only would he and could he, I'm sure the government has killed people in prison, most likely. So, yeah, I get where you're coming from, Sands. Finch shows up unannounced to the FBI New York office, and Harris quickly suspicions that Brian took NZT. He says, I don't mean to brag. I mean, I do, but I told you my immunity shot hadn't worn off yet. Brian is such a fun character. He tracked all of the information he and Grover gathered in the trenches to figure out Apocryphon isn't the street name of NZT like the FBI had assumed, but it is rather the maker of NZT's chosen drug creator name. And Brian believes that he actually figured out that that guy's name is Clay Meeks because he is the only person with the skills and the connection to make it happen. Brian wants back on the FBI side of things, but Rebecca knows that can't happen. He is on a street drug now, and the FBI can't be held responsible. Agent Brewster walks in, and Finch says, I think I know your sister, and Adam says, Punky, as if he has heard this joke a million times. It's awkward, but I'd imagine it would be because of how that I feel like Adam Brewster is trying to be the cool agent taking the place of the cool consultant. Since Brian can't work with the FBI and the DEA, he goes out on his own to find Meeks, and he does find him. However, Meeks says that he's on the outs with what Brian calls the Legion and what he calls the Hellfire Genius Club. Again, great witty stuff from the team behind this Limitless series. As Brian is with Apocryphon, Harris and Brewster are raiding the wrong people, right? They are the wrong people. Brewster is dirty, and this is all part of a plan. It must be, because I've never liked that Brewster character, and this is the only piece of the puzzle that fits in, is for him to actually be bad. The raid went too easily. None of this feels right. Harris and Finch meet up after the raid, and Rebecca is getting Brian to believe that he was wrong about Meeks and that he was just crazy. I'm not buying it. I'm not sold on it, not nearly as easily as Brian has been sold on it. Nez and Boyle go to talk with Sands. I'm sure this will reveal that the FBI and DEA got it wrong here. Well, turns out I'm wrong. Sands wants to bring life in prison back on the table. He is now willing to flip on Mara in exchange for protection. He even says he'll tell them where Piper Barrett is. I'm still skeptical, but maybe I was wrong. Papa Finch finds Brian going over all the evidence that brought him to Meeks and trying to figure out where he went wrong. But his dad says maybe Piper is gone, and it makes me think dear old dad thinks Piper is dead, much like Brian's sister does. And that's an uncomfortable thought, that two people that, should be on the main character side seem to be giving up. I think Brian has figured it out. What if all the people the FBI and DEA captured are pawns in a larger game? Finch takes another street NZT pill to see if his theory pans out. Back at the FBI, Naz and Harris and Boyle have a meeting about Sands turning on Mara and plan out how they can arrest him. DEA agent Adam Brewster goes to the prison to talk with Sands. But right after we see Brewster is in the prison, we cut to Brian going to warn the FBI about Brewster. He tells them that Brewster is on Team Sands and how all of the people they arrested are members of the Legion of Whom. They are Mara's inner circle, and that they are only bringing down Mara's people to help Sands' Legion of Whom rise and take over, behind the scenes. Naz calls Brian out while he is laying the things he discovered out, because he keeps saying we, not I, and Brian tells her that with or without the FBI, he'll find Piper and stop them. Naz then calls in Mike and Ike they give Brian an FBI sanctioned NZT pill, and we are off to the races. Big problem now is that the side effect blocker has worn off. Brian is tripping. This is going to be pure chaos. Brian keeps seeing Piper dying, and I'm sure that his family talking bad about her, it didn't help anything. It's just such a bad trip, and we haven't seen Brian go through this in quite some time. Harris can tell that Brian is struggling. I mean, obviously her dad was a drug addicted guy for most of her time. She's doing her best to help him hide the side effects from the FBI because Brian is going to take the NZT with or without them. So Harris thinks it's in everyone's best interest for her to help him get through this. Brian and the FBI track Clay Meeks, the drug maker known as Apocryphon, to an old foster mother's place while the FBI question Meeks. Finch hears a name that stands out to him. With his NZT focus, Brian is having a good time for now, and he is able to realize that the name that he recognized is a Canadian diplomat who is negotiating at the United Nations to help Canada and Greenland strike up a deal on a new waterway. The Legion used a car bomb to kill all of Mara's people that the FBI and the DEA captured. So wouldn't you know it, by the time the FBI arrived to the United Nations, the Legion have also killed the Canadian diplomat. Made it seem like suicide, but Brian sees evidence that the agents are missing because he's got NZT and they don't. After a very unsuccessful day, Harris wants to take Brian to her place to keep an eye on him due to the side effects, but Brian insists that she take him to see his dad. Brian wants to apologize to his family and specifically his father. Brian regrets not being honest, not just with Harris, but with his family. After speaking with his family, Brian is at Harris's place because she won't, thinks it's for his best. And Harris tells him to rest. And as soon as she goes to bed, Brian takes another street NZT, knowing that he can experience all these side effects, but time is short and he needs as much of his brain working as possible. When Rebecca wakes up, Brian lays out what he determined, and she asks if he rested. And, he says, what we figured out, this isn't, a one shift on, one shift off kind of problem. He has to hit the best Brian he can be at all times. The side effects are back with a vengeance and so bad that when Brian sees a box of donuts, he hallucinates that there are fingers coming out of them. Now Finch is experiencing the loss of time. 3 hours have passed and Brian didn't realize it. Thankfully, Brian has Rebecca to lean on, unlike Mara did in the movie. Because that was one of the things that was unfortunate about Limitless, the film, is that Mara was such a loner. Even when he brought his girlfriend into the knowledge of NZT, she still wasn't really being much of an asset because he was trying to protect her. And that's the good part about having Rebecca be, Rebecca and the whole team, Mike, Ike, Boyle, everybody. It's good that Brian has the support system, whether it's his family or the FBI or whatever, because when things happen, like him losing time, he's got people to help him through it. Things are getting worse. The next day, Mike and Ike are even unsure as to whether or not they should even give Brian his NZT pill. That's how bad he looks. Finch takes it, and the team go to give a warning. Another diplomat they believe is being targeted, but it's too late. Once again, the Legion takes him out in front of them. Harris is being rough with the guy that shot the diplomat, but Finch realizes he was forced into this, and Brian talks to the killer as though he's a person, not like he's a heinous killer. and they realized that it was because this Patsy had his daughter taken that he had to do what Sands and the Legion wanted him to do. But the FBI, they go down a surprising route, but although they've done it a handful of times before, but they give the killer an NZT pill to help him remember things that he doesn't even know that he knows. It worked. The FBI are able to save the Patsy's daughter and are raiding what seems to be the Legion's headquarters. Is Sands here? Is Piper here? These are my main questions. Also, has Piper created the side effect blocker? Because we never actually got that answer. Harris tells Finch to stay in the vehicle, but also, this isn't my first time watching television, and I know that will not happen. While the FBI are in the manufacturing building, a fire occurs, and Brian thinks it is time for him to become the hero of this story. Although, as we know as the viewers, he's been the hero the whole time. Brian imagines himself as multiple heroes, but lands on the name the Punisher, mixed with Brian. Even in the finale, he loves cracking really dumb jokes. Harris shoots Sands in self-defense, but doesn't kill him. After the raid, we still don't know where Piper is, but the Legion seems to be done. Harris takes Finch home, and his dad is happy to see him. However, Brian's dad isn't home alone. Big Papa Finch is catching up with Piper Barrett. When the FBI raided the Legion's hideout, Piper escaped. Brian doesn't understand. He tells Piper, "I came to save you, but you ran?" And that's when Piper reveals to Brian that she had to run because she created something that she doesn't want the government in control of. Piper didn't just make a temporary side effect blocker. This time it is permanent. And Piper tells Brian Finch, if anybody deserves this side effect blocker, it's you. Piper kisses Brian and shoots or gives him a shot of the side effect blocker, this time permanent. And Finch knows that Piper isn't going to stay. We jump 3 days into the future. Harris and Finch meet on a rooftop to discuss Brian returning full-time to the New York FBI office. Now they have a bigger budget and the new secret NZT squad. Before it is all over, they reveal that Mike's name is Daryl, so Mike and Ike are legit agents for the new squad. Daryl and Jason no longer Mike and Ike. This works great for my hope, dream, goal, desire of doing a Limitless revival. I give it a 4 out of 5. It's a good finish that could go up to a 5 out of 5. Be a great finish if they announce a Limitless show on a streaming service, whether it's HBO Max or Paramount Plus. I don't care. I'll take it on the Hulu, the Netflix, whatever. But on the subject of announcements, coming next week from the channel will be Wednesday Rewind. Please stand by. I say that because it will be an announcement video talking about the changes from Mr. Super Oz, the channel, and what to expect from TV reviews and things going forward. Thank you for joining me on this journey throughout Limitless, the series. Come back on Friday and join Mr. Super Oz Monday for Monday Movie Mayhem. Thank you. Bye.